The year was 2003. PlayStation 2 was dominating living rooms worldwide with its DVD capabilities and massive game library. Xbox and Nintendo had muscled their way into the market as well. The GameCube sold just 21.74 million units compared to the PS2's staggering 155 million. But the real tragedy is that many of the Cube's most creative games didn't just lose to Sony's juggernaut, they barely registered as blips on anyone's radar, despite earning the kind of passionate fan devotion that money can't buy. Before we dust off the purple cube and dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe for more retro gaming stories, so you can relax, unwind, and rewind with us every week. Starting at number 10 is PN03 2003. The game wasn't just part of Capcom's ambitious Capcom 5 lineup. It was their most experimental gamble. Players controlled Vanessa Schneider, a bounty hunter whose every dodge, spin, and attack flowed with balletic precision across sterile, futuristic corridors. The game looked like a deadly dance performance. Stunning? Yes, but confusing for anyone holding the controller. Critics admired its artistic vision, but that very uniqueness became its commercial death sentence. In Japan, Capcom shipped 25,000 copies to retailers. Under 11,000 sold, making it the country's 26th best-selling title during its launch week. Worldwide, PN03 barely cracked 30,000 copies. That's fewer sales than most GameCube sports games managed without even trying. At number 9 is Lost Kingdoms in 2002. This game was literally 5 years ahead of its time, and nobody realized what they were missing. From Software, yes, the same studio that would later torture players with Dark Souls, created something even more unusual. A real-time action RPG where Princess Katia wielded magical cards instead of swords, summoning creatures and casting spells by flicking cards at enemies. Every card had limited uses before disappearing forever, creating genuine resource management tension that predated modern deck-building games by nearly a decade. The combat felt like watching a physical card game come to life, with monsters materializing from nowhere to fight at your command. Critics praised its innovative fusion of genres, but sales barely cracked 100,000 copies globally. In 2002, card-based combat didn't sound exciting. Magic: The Gathering was still primarily tabletop. Digital card games didn't exist, and action fans couldn't wrap their heads around strategic resource management. Sometimes being first just means being misunderstood. Moving to number 8 is Custom-Robo 2004. Imagine if Pokemon let you build custom robots that beat the hell out of each other in arena combat. Yeah, this was everything the GameCube did best. Deep customization systems, addictive multiplayer battles, and that special Nintendo charm that made collecting parts feel meaningful. Players assembled robot fighters from hundreds of components, then unleashed them in intense holographic arenas. Japanese fans were already obsessed. The series had multiple successful entries on Nintendo 64, with devoted communities sharing strategies and custom builds. When Custom-Robo finally reached North America in 2004, expectations were sky high. Instead, it landed with the kind of thud that echoes through empty store aisles. The culprit was Nintendo of America's marketing team, who seemed to have no idea what they were selling. TV spots focused on generic robot combat, completely ignoring the deep customization that made the game addictive. Store displays buried it among mindless action games. Sales hit roughly 150,000 copies, decent for most publishers, but catastrophically low for a Nintendo-published title. By 2004, the GameCube was already being written off, and even first-party games couldn't break through the noise. At number 7 is Skies of Arcadia Legends 2002. This game was Sega's attempt to salvage their beloved Dreamcast RPG by porting it to GameCube. And they did everything right. Added new content, improved graphics, faster loading times, and fixed every complaint from the original release. This was also classic JRPG storytelling at its absolute peak. Airship pirates exploring floating continents with a sense of adventure that made every discovery feel genuinely magical. The world building was extraordinary, the characters unforgettable, and the epic scope rivaled anything Final Fantasy had produced. Critics called it one of the best RPGs of the generation. But praise from gaming magazines couldn't overcome a brutal reality. By 2002, the PS2 owned the JRPG market completely. Final Fantasy X had already claimed the spotlight. The GameCube owners were perceived as preferring action games over 60-hour adventures. Worse, Sega's reputation had been shattered by the Dreamcast's failure. Many gamers didn't even realize they were still making games. Skies of Arcadia Legends sold fewer than 200,000 copies, becoming the poster child for a right game, wrong platform. Breaking into our top 6 is what happens when Nintendo publishes the weirdest game ever made, then pretends it doesn't exist. Chibi-Robo 2005. This game was aggressively anti-commercial. Instead of saving the world, players controlled a tiny household robot whose mission was making a dysfunctional family happy by cleaning their house and solving their personal problems. This wasn't action-adventure gaming. It was more like therapy disguised as entertainment. You organized closets, helped toys sort out their drama, and uncovered a family's struggles through the environment itself. Critics praised its emotional intelligence, creative gameplay, and surprisingly deep social commentary hidden beneath the adorable robot exterior. But those glowing reviews couldn't overcome the fundamental marketing nightmares. How do you sell a game about household chores? Nintendo's solution was to essentially not try. Chibi-Robo received minimal advertising, limited retail distribution, and sold roughly 100,000 copies total. Nintendo seemed to view it as an experiment they weren't sure they wanted to succeed. Years later, when indie games proved the unusual concepts could find audiences, Chibi-Robo's innovative design started looking prophetic instead of bizarre. At number 5 is Treasure's Ikaruga 2003. The concept of this game sounds simple. Switch between black and white polarities to absorb matching bullets and deal extra damage to opposite colors. In practice, it demands the kind of split-second decision-making that separated gaming masters from mere mortals. This was an art masquerading as a video game. Bullet patterns were so precisely crafted, they resembled choreographed performances. Devoted players spent hundreds of hours learning each stage's rhythm. Critics called it the absolute pinnacle of the bullet hell genre. But that critical acclaim highlighted exactly why it flopped commercially. Ikaruga was designed for the tiny subset of players who considered punishing difficulty a feature, not a bug. The game sold fewer than 30,000 copies on GameCube. The perfect version of something almost nobody wanted was still commercial suicide. Sometimes excellence isn't enough. Reaching number 4 is Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean 2003. This was a JRPG where traditional magic systems were replaced with cards that literally aged and transformed over time if left unused, creating a living, evolving inventory system. The world building was spectacular. Floating continents suspended an endless sky where people grew wings instead of hearts, and magic was powered by Magnus, cards that captured the essence of objects and experiences. Even by JRPG standards, this was high-concept storytelling taken to extremes. Critics praised its innovation and ambition, but that same complexity became commercial poison. New players faced overwhelming learning curves just to understand basic combat, while JRPG veterans struggled to adapt familiar strategies to completely alien systems. The voice acting couldn't compete with Final Fantasy's star power. The card mechanics, though innovative, felt gimmicky to players, expecting sword and sorcery combat, and the 60-plus hour length intimidated casual players already drowning in the PS2's massive game library. Baten Kaitos sold approximately 180,000 copies worldwide, respectable for most JRPGs, but devastating for a game that cost as much to develop as major first-party Nintendo titles. Into our top 3 is Mitchell Ansel's Beyond Good and Evil 2003. This game right here is gaming's most heartbreaking commercial failure. It had everything critics claimed they wanted from video games: intelligent storytelling, a strong female protagonist, innovative gameplay mixing action with investigative journalism, and a world that felt genuinely alive with personality and purpose. In an era dominated by gruff male heroes, Jade solved problems with her camera as often as her staff. The game's themes of media manipulation and government corruption felt surprisingly mature for 2003, delivered through gameplay that made investigation feel as exciting as combat. Critics lavished unprecedented praise. The game topped every Best of 2003 list, but critical acclaim couldn't overcome brutal commercial reality. Beyond Good and Evil failed spectacularly on all platforms, including GameCube. Despite being arguably the best version, technically, it sold fewer than 150,000 copies on Nintendo's system. Ubisoft's marketing catastrophically failed to communicate what made the game special. Trailers emphasized generic action elements instead of the photography mechanics and investigative journalism that define the actual experience. Store placement buried it among mindless action games, and the unusual genre blend confused potential buyers who couldn't categorize it easily. At number 2 is Hideki Kamiya's Viewtiful Joe, 2003. This game was pure video game joy distilled into visual form. A side-scrolling beat-em-up where players controlled a movie stuntman who could slow down time, speed up actions, and zoom in for dramatic effect. Every punch landed with comic book impact. Every combo flowed like choreographed cinema. The art style was genuinely revolutionary. Seriously, they combined 2D gameplay with 3D visual effects in ways that made every screenshot look like a living comic book. Critics called it one of the most innovative action games ever created, but innovation couldn't overcome harsh market realities. Viewtiful Joe's GameCube version sold 275,000 copies worldwide, decent numbers that should have been cause for celebration. Instead, they showed a big failure for a game that earned universal critical acclaim. The problem was timing and positioning. Viewtiful Joe's retro aesthetic fell backwards looking when every other game was pushing photorealistic graphics. Its challenging difficulty intimidated players accustomed to easier experiences, and Capcom's marketing presented it as nostalgia instead of the forward-thinking innovation it actually represented. By the time players understood Viewtiful Joe's brilliance, most had already dismissed it as outdated. Sometimes being ahead of your time means watching everyone else catch up to your brilliance. And at number 1, the most beloved commercial failure in gaming history is Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem 2002. This horror game was a psychological experiment that literally messed with players' minds through innovative sanity effects that shattered the fourth wall in ways gaming had never attempted. Just hear me out. Your character's sanity drops, and suddenly the game pretends to delete your save file, or fake error messages claim your controller disconnected while it's working perfectly, or the volume appears to mute itself while audio continues normally. These effects created genuine moments of panic as players questioned whether their hardware was malfunctioning. The game spanned centuries, following multiple protagonists across different time periods, all connected by an ancient artifact of unspeakable evil. Fans were completely awestruck by its ambition, innovation, and mature storytelling. Despite universal critical acclaim, Eternal Darkness sold fewer than 500,000 copies worldwide. For context, that's fewer sales than most GameCube sports games managed without any critical recognition whatsoever. The failure was entirely Nintendo's fault. They'd never published an M-rated game before, and their marketing department had absolutely no idea how to sell mature horror to their family-friendly audience. Store placement was inconsistent. Retailers either buried it in horror sections where Nintendo fans never looked, or placed it among kid-friendly Nintendo games where it obviously didn't belong. Ironically, Eternal Darkness's commercial failure taught Nintendo that innovation was worth pursuing regardless of immediate sales. Its sanity effects were so groundbreaking that modern horror games still steal its ideas 20 years later. All these games prove that critical acclaim didn't always equal sales success, but also how many of them are now remembered as cult classics. Which of these hidden gems did you play on the GameCube, and which ones did you miss? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more gaming history, so you can relax, unwind, and rewind with us.